I accidentally played half of Black Myth Wukong the wrong way, and it completely changed how I understand the game. By the time I reached the end of Chapter 3, I realized something shocking. I have been using the default gourd with no upgrades. But here is a twist: playing the game wrong actually taught me how Black Myth Wukong is really meant to be played. When you start Black Myth Wukong, the game gives you a Healing Gourd. It's basically your lifeline. Every difficult fight, every boss battle, every close call, just like a flask in Souls game. Naturally, most players assume the same rule applies: upgrade your healing item as soon as possible. Except I didn't. Not because I wanted a challenge, not because I was doing some hardcore run. I simply didn't realize I could upgrade it. So I kept playing. Boss after boss, chapter after chapter. Until eventually I made it almost halfway through the game using the same 4 healing charges I started with. So the real question becomes, how did I even survive so long? And what happens when you accidentally play Black Myth Wukong the wrong way? It turns out that making this mistake forced me to learn something most players skip. Black Myth Wukong isn't really about raw skill. It's all about patience, resource management, and understanding the rhythm of every fight. And playing the game wrong revealed that faster than anything else. The first lesson I learned from my accidental challenge run was simple: panicking gets you killed. When you only have 4 healing charges, you can't afford to spam them. Every gourd use becomes a decision. Do you heal now or do you wait? At first I treated the gourd like emergency button. Health drops, drink, health drops again, drink again. But that strategy doesn't last long when you only have 4 charges. So I had to slow down. Instead of reacting emotionally, I started reacting to patterns. Boss wins up, attack timing, safe window. And something interesting happened. The game started to feel a little easier. Not because I had more health, but because I finally started paying attention. One fight that really taught me this was the Macaque Chief. The second phase of that fight felt impossible at first, but eventually I realized the real problem wasn't the boss, it was me. I was wasting all my heals in the early phase, so I changed my strategy. I stopped healing every time I took damage. Instead, I saved my gourds for the second phase, and suddenly the fight became manageable. That moment changed how I approached the entire game. Because the biggest enemy wasn't the boss, it was my panic. I started noticing something interesting about Black Myth Wukong. The game gives you a lot of powerful tools, but most players treat those tools like unlimited resources. They use them as soon as become available. I did the same thing at first. Big attack ready, use it. Mana full, cast something. Health low, drink the gourd. But with only 4 heals, that strategy falls apart quickly. So instead I started thinking differently. Not what can I use right now, but what should I save for later. Mana became a backup plan, abilities became problem solvers, and healing became my last line of defense. Instead of dumping all my resources early, I lowered them. Dodge first, attack second, use abilities only when necessary, and heal only when things actually went wrong. That change alone made boss fights feel completely different, because suddenly the goal wasn't to overwhelm the boss, it was to outlast them. Now here is the funny part. I wasn't the only one who played the game wrong. When I looked into other players' experience, I found tons of similar stories on Reddit. Some people didn't realize certain items could be reused, others misunderstood mechanics because of unclear item descriptions, and some players didn't discover key NPC upgrades until later in the game. For example, a few players thought certain items were one-time uses, so they saved them for the emergencies that never came. Others didn't know that some NPCs upgrade your gear or stats, meaning they were unknowingly playing a much harder version of the game. And honestly, that says something interesting about Black Myth Wukong. The game rewards exploration and attention. If you talk to NPCs, explore hidden areas, and read item descriptions carefully, you unlock systems that make your journey much easier. But if you rush through the story, you might miss important mechanics entirely, which is exactly what happened to me. I didn't skip the upgrades on purpose. I simply didn't realize they existed, and the game didn't stop me. It just quietly let me keep struggling. But despite making the game harder for myself, I had an amazing time, because every victory felt earned. Every boss defeat felt like a real accomplishment. When you have limited healing, every fight becomes intense. Every mistake matters, every dodge matters, and every moment you survive with barely any health left feels incredible. Looking back, I am actually glad this happened, because playing half the game wrong taught me 3 important lessons. First, patience beats aggression. The best players aren't the fastest attackers. They're the ones who wait for the right moment. Second, resource management is a real skill check. Mana abilities and healing aren't meant to be spammed. They're meant to be used strategically. And third, exploration matters more than you think. Black Myth Wukong hides some of its most important systems behind NPCs, upgrades and hidden mechanics. If you rush through the game, you might miss tools that completely change your experience. Ironically, the mistake that made my playthrough harder also made me appreciate the game more, because it forced me to actually learn how the combat system works. So yes, you should absolutely upgrade your gourd. It makes the game easier, it gives you more room for mistakes, and it saves you from accidentally turning your playthrough into a challenge run. But if you ever want to truly understand how Black Myth Wukong works, try fighting a few bosses without relying on healing. Because the moment you stop spamming the gourd, you start seeing the game differently. Boss patterns become clearer, dodges become more meaningful, and every victory feels far more satisfying. Sometimes the best way to learn a game is by accidentally playing it the wrong way. Thanks for watching, hit that like button, subscribe for more Black Myth Wukong lore and guide videos, the Destined One.